Chapter 10, Managing Employees' Performance. LOs, identify the activities involved in the performance management, discuss the purposes of performance management systems, define 5 criteria for measuring effectiveness of performance management system, compare the major methods of managing performance, describe major performance involved in terms of their advantages and disadvantages. Define the types of rating errors and explain how to minimize them, explain how to provide performance feedback effectively, summarize ways to produce improvement in unsatisfactory performance, discuss legal and ethical issues that affect performance. Performance management requires knowing what activities and outputs are desired, knowing whether the activities and outputs occur, providing feedback to help employees meet expectations. So knowing what activities and outputs are desired, and whether they actually occur. When we think in terms of the process, you have to know what goes into the organization, what type of operation you have, what is you trying to do, and what do you need to have for inputs, and what are the outputs that you expect as a result of that. And did they properly occur the way you thought they were going to? And if they didn't, then that means you got to go back and do some type of reassessing somewhere along the lines. And that means backtracking into the process. Let's go back to the start. And you have to go back to the very beginning to figure out where did we wrong. Give me an example. If you put a wrong input in to the process, then it's going to affect the output. And therefore, when you get this, you won't get the result that you're seeking. And the outputs and inputs could be any number of things. That could be the technology you're using. That could be, the processes. Any number of things it could be. Providing feedback to help employees meet expectations. You got to provide feedback about this. And when you figure these things out, you got to let the employees know. Give them feedback so that they can execute on it. And it has to be valid feedback. Benefits. Tells top performers they are valued. When you have top performers, make sure that you let them know that they are valued. There are some managers who believe, well, I don't tell them that because they're doing their job. You got to be able to tell them when somebody's striving. And you're going to say, well, what's the incentive for people to want to do better? It ain't just enough to say they just want to earn a wage. Encourages communications between managers and their employees. Encourages communication between managers and employees. You need managers speaking with employees. They have to have open lines of communication. If you have managers that's not communicating with the people, or people are afraid to speak with them, you have an issue. And that's not with the employees, that's with the manager. Establish consistent standards for evaluating employees. Everybody must be evaluated in the same manner. You cannot have discrepancies. You cannot have discrepancies about how people are being evaluated. It has to be consistent. This is the only way to determine who's doing what and who's successful. Helps the organization identify its strongest and its weakest employees. It's by having this standard way of evaluating, you can also see they refer to sometimes as who are your studs and who are your duds. And when you identify that, then you can do things to praise the ones who are strongest and doing a good job, and you can also put things in place to help the ones who are the weakest. Steps in the process management. So we look at the steps. Look at step 1. Define the performance outcomes for the company, division and department. Step 2, develop employee goals, behavior, and actions. Step 3, provide support in ongoing performance discussions. Step 4, evaluate performance. Step 5, identify improvements needed. Step 6, provide consequences for performance results. So it's a complete process. Remember I said when something goes wrong, you have to know where did it go wrong in the process. And you look at these 6 steps right here. And if something gets off, let's say that something gets off, let's say that step 1 and step 2 and step 3 are correct, but you messed up in step 4. Well, that affects step 5 and step 6. Strategic purpose helps organizations achieve business objectives. Measures must be linked to the organization's goals. So when you look at the strategic objectives, measurements must be linked to organizational goals. Everything has to be interconnected. You cannot have things that groups or teams or individuals are pursuing that's not consistent with the organization goals, and it must be things that can be measured, and you can show the nexus to that. Administrative purpose. Ways the organizations use the way to provide information for day-to-day decisions. Ways that organizations use the system to provide information for day-to-day decisions. You got to be able to show your day-to-day decisions. How are you using information? How are you using the system? Developmental purpose. Basis for developing employees' knowledge and skills. So what's your basis for developing employees' knowledge and skills? Everything you do has a purpose. What is it? If you know what your purpose is, one of the things you'd be able to work back and say, well, what do I need to do to achieve this purpose? So, polling question. Suppose you are a manager and the performance management system in your company used often created competition among team members. How would you address this issue? And you see the options right here. And what do you think the answer to that is? So you look at it and you look at it and you think in terms of competition. It creates competition is good. I would make collaboration be one of the criteria for the evaluation. I would increase the specificity of the feedback I provided. I would focus my review on personality traits rather than task. And I can tell you this, I know what my answer would be, and I'm not going to say what my answer would be because everybody's will probably be different. I think there's more than one good answer here. Effective performance measures. So when you have fit with strategy, goals, and culture. Validity, measure all relevant aspects of performance and not the irrelevant ones. Reliability, yield, consistent results over time. Inter-rater reliability, test, retest reliability. Acceptability, accepted by those who use it. Specific feedback, give specific expectations and methods to achieve goals. So when you look at it, there's a process that starts with the company's goals and strategies. Now you start getting to things where you're testing and you're verifying. And is it something that can be duplicated? And is it something that's going to be accepted by everybody? Do people view it as fair? And giving the feedback to people, you give the feedback that when people view it accepted and view it as fair, you can give the feedback about expectations and the methods to achieve those goals, and people will accept it. Contamination and deficiency of job performance measure. So you see job performance measure here. See contamination, you see validity, you see deficiency, and you see actual or true job performance. And you see how this can overlap. And that in essence can be your problem because you want to be able to have a true measure of the job performance, and you have to be able to do that without the contamination and deficiency. Simple ranking. Managers rank employees from highest to poorest performer. Alternation ranking. So when managers rank employees from highest to poorest performer, alternation ranking. This is where they know who what, all the way from the top to the bottom, and who's in between. Forced distribution method. Assigns a certain percentage of employees to each category in a set of categories, exceptional to not exceptional. Paired comparison method compares each employee with others to establish rankings. Rankings are often not linked to the organizational goals, and the ranking is open to interpretation. So this is when a manager is just looking simply at his or her people, and they choose to try to determine, the ranking of those people, the quality of the work of the folks, basically strongest to the weakest. Methods for measuring performance, rating attributes. So graphic rating scale lists traits and provides a rating scale for each trait. Employer uses scale to indicate extent to which employee displays each trait. Rating scales are subjective and vary by employer. Mixed standard scale uses several statements to describe each trait. Employer scores employee in terms of how employee compares to the statements. So when you see, even when you look at this, you still have a fair level of where I'm gonna say a manager can lose their objectivity because you have some subjectivity involved in each of these. Rating behaviors, critical incident method. Specific instances of effective and ineffective employee behavior documented. Employees receive feedback about what they do well and what they do poorly. Behavioral anchored rating builds on critical incidents approach. Behaviors rated on scales showing specific statements of behavior that contribute to different levels of performance. So as you all go through your careers and stuff, you will come in contact with it. The one that I have the most experience with is going to be the critical incident method. And I fairly enjoyed it, and I thought it was, because realistically, you're telling somebody what they're good at and what they're not good at. And you're giving them feedback about that. But you're also, in this, what it doesn't say is, you're also going to talk to them about what you can do to address those things, those areas where they perform poorly. Behavior observation scale. So a variation of the bars. Rating scale includes all critical behaviors for effective performance. Ask the manager to rate the frequency with which employee has exhibited each behavior during the rating scale. Rating period. Organizational behavior methods. Builds on branch of a psychology called behaviorism. Employee provides feedback and reinforcement to encourage behaviors that achieve company goals. Doesn't work well for complex jobs. So you see, depending upon what type of job that you have and what type of organization you have, it may determine what type of rating scale you want to use. And then you have also too, where you have some options. You may have some people may have different types of things. But I will tell you this, in most organizations that I see, this is not optional. You can't pick and choose which one you would like to use. They have a standard, and it's agency wide. Measuring results, productivity, getting more done with fewer resources increases the company's profits. So, you see this a lot now, where they're trying to get more and more with less people and things along those lines, because it can increase profits that way. Management by objectives. People at each level of organization set goals in a process that flows from top to bottom. Employees at all levels contribute to the organization's overall goals. Set goals becomes the standards for evaluating employee performance. So this is something that goes from top to bottom, and everybody knows. Employees at the bottom, at the top, middle, and the top, everybody knows what's expected. 3 components. Goals are specific, difficult, and objective. Managers work with employees to set goals. Manager gives objective feedback to monitor progress. So you can see here, manager's going to sit down and is going to speak with these employees on an individual basis, and they're going to go through this. So there should not be a situation where people do not understand, after they've gone through this process with the manager, because the manager sat down with them to explain this. Total quality management. Assessment of both individual performance and the system within which individual works. Yields subjective feedback from managers, peers, and customers. Yields objective feedback based on work process obtained from a variety of methods called statistical quality control. So you can see when you look at the total quality management, it has this 2-step process, and you're looking at getting subjective feedback, and you're also looking at getting some data as well, comparing the two to draw your conclusions about a person. Total quality management. Total quality management approach to performance management includes subjective feedback from managers, peers, and customers, as well as objective feedback based on work process. 360 degrees performance appraisal. So this is when you think of 360. This is when, I'll give you an example. If you have an employee and you want to do a 360 appraisal on them, you would get information from above them, from the manager, on their level peers beside them and below them if they have. These are usually done for managers, by the way, and the people who report to them, employees. So that's why they call it a 360. And they'll give them like a questionnaire and tell me, how does Jim in these 10, how do you see Jim in these 10 categories? And the people above him on his level and below him will answer. And then that information is compiled. And then the person who's actually going to do the debrief of the appraisal, the manager, whomever, HR, will sit down with Jim and let him know what the results are. Customer feedback is one source of information used in information performance appraisals. Other sources include managers, peers, subordinates, employees themselves. And when you're in sales or you're marketing, or something like that, one of the best ways to find out about your folks is through customer feedback. If you have, or any position where somebody's required to deal with the public, customer feedback. And there's an old saying in sales and marketing, the customer is always right. Errors in performance management. Types of rating errors. Raters tend to give higher evaluations to people they think are similar to themselves. And I cannot tell you how so true that is. That's one of the things where people have their biases kick in. We are most comfortable with people who are most like us. And I don't mean somebody who's the same race or the same sex. I mean somebody who's more like you mentally and works and thinks like you. Contrast. Error. Rater compares individual not against objective standard but against other employees. Distributional error. Rater uses only part of the rating scale. Leniency. Reviewer rates everyone near top. Strictness. Reviewer favors lower rankings. Central tendency. Reviewer rates everyone in the middle. So you can have this thing too with raters. They go through, and I've heard somebody say before, I never give anybody, let's say 100 is the best you can get. I never give anybody 100 because that means you're perfect. And then I've heard some people say, well, realistically, I never give anybody 100 because nobody's perfect. Or nobody's better than an 80. I never give above 80 because nobody's better than that. And then you have some folks, well, I give everybody a 85 stuff, range and stuff, because I think everybody's doing a pretty good job. Those are three examples of where you have the leniency, strictness, and central tendency, and all three are wrong. Rater bias lets their opinion of one quality color their opinion of the others. The halo, basically, is you think everybody's great. The horns area, you think everybody's negative or bad. And this is something that, even when I was doing ratings of people that worked for me in the Army, I had to make sure that I was removing my personal feelings about them, emotional feelings about them out, and looking at them strictly as to a soldier doing a job. Possible ratings errors in performance measurement. So when we look at this, we see similar to me, overrating people who are similar to you. Contrast error, underrating people who are different. And that can be any number of things. I'll give you an example. It could be man and woman. It could be race. It could be just how somebody thinks. Halo. You look at it, overrate based on one good quality. Give you an example. You have somebody who works for you, and he's really good at one or two particular things, but he's not that good at some other things. But you only look at the good things that he does, and therefore you look at the halo. The horns, you got somebody who's actually pretty good in most areas, but the one thing they struggle in is the one thing you choose to rate them on. Bill rates all of his employees very low except for Jan. Bill gives Jan above average ratings because she consistently comes to work on time. Bill makes the rating errors of blank for his team and blank for Jan. What would those answers be? Your answer is B. Ways to reduce errors. Raters can be trained to avoid making errors using a variety of methods. Rating fictional employees and discussing decisions. Studying actual examples of various performances. Focusing on complex nature of employee performance. Data analytics can be used to find patterns in what employees do and their level of engagement within the organizations. So these are pretty much self-explanatory, but when you're looking at this, try to find ways to reduce stuff. One of the things I used to always tell people, managers that work for me, was Listen, before you go ahead and do this, do your ratings, we do our evaluations, performance evaluations, make sure you clear your mind a couple of minutes before and think about everybody objectively and rate them on what they do, their jobs, not anything else. Political behavior and performance appraisal. Sometimes raters are political. They distort evaluations to advance their own personal goals. Now, what that means is I'm somebody who wants to be promoted. Well, in order to be promoted, I want to show that I have done a great job and my people are doing extremely well under me. Now, let's just say my predecessor had 10 people, and when these 10 people, we had 5 of them that were doing good and 2 that one that was outstanding and 4 that were struggling. I take over and hear me tell it, everybody's outstanding. Well, that's for my own personal goals. Calibration meetings can be used to minimize politics. Managers discuss performance ratings and provide evidence supporting their ratings with the goal of eliminating intentional rating errors. So realistically, when you look at calibration, bottom line is if you tell me somebody's great, you need to write that and show me why you say he's great. What has he done? You can articulate that and you can show me. Scheduling performance feedback should be regular, expected management activity, beneficial when scheduled frequently. So I can tell you when you talk about this, in many instances, if I remember correctly, what we used to do, we used to have them quarterly. So you can have 4 a year. Most effective when information does not surprise employee. And everybody knows when they have employees are motivated when they know if they are on the right track. And this is how I was always really good at, I felt like I was really good at, after having these evaluations, I would always close with something positive to let them know, we're moving on the right track. Even for somebody who was struggling, we had work to do to help him or her. We still want to close on the right note, positive note, because the last thing you tell them is a lot of times what they remember the most. Preparing for a feedback session. Managers and employees should be well prepared for each session. Managers should ask each employee to complete a self-assessment ahead of time. So when you do this, like I said, give them notice, let them get prepared mentally for it, but you get prepared for it as a manager and clear your mind and be well prepared for it. And do your homework before you go in there as a manager. Don't just grab a bunch of files and run in there and start doing evaluation today. No, look at them at least a day or so, a couple of days in advance on each one of them to figure out exactly what it is you want to say and why you want to say it. And also give them time to to do their self-assessments ahead of time if need be, and you can review those. Conducting feedback session, tell and sell approach. Managers tell employees their ratings and justify those ratings. So tell and sell. What you want them to know is truthful and factual. It's not based on innuendo or your opinion. And so if you tell Mike that he's done a good job, then tell Mike, here's why you did a good job. You remember on this date you did this, on that date you did this. You've continually done these kind of things. This is why I say you're doing a good job. Tell and listen approach. Managers tell employees their ratings and let the employees explain their own view. A lot of times when I found this was the case, particularly when the employees don't agree with what you say or what you tell them or how you're evaluating them or rating them. And I would always listen and stuff. And we would have a conversation, not a debate, but a conversation about it. Problem-solving approach. Managers and employees work to solve performance problems. One of the things when it comes to problem-solving stuff, I always found it beneficial to actually also to almost do the tell and listen here too. Tell them what I see and ask them, what is the reason I'm seeing it, or what do they think is the reason that they're having this problem, and let them tell me. And then we talk about, well, now what can we do? And notice I use the word we. So what can we do to try to overcome this? The feedback session should conclude by setting or revising goals for the coming period. So you're closing out with setting goals and stuff. This is where we are. This is where we're trying to go. But you also, in some instances, if it's been one where you particularly had a lot of things that they need to work on, you might want to give some words of encouragement right there too at that point to uplift them. Type of action taken depends on what employee lacks. Lack of ability, and this is so true. The type of action taken determines what type of problem you're dealing with. Okay, a lack of ability Okay, that means you don't have alignment. You have somebody doing something that they're not capable of doing. Okay, so you got to that's usually somebody that you need to remove from that situation. Particularly if you've trained them and you've educated them, you've done everything you can do, and they can't do it, then you don't have the proper alignment with that. Lack of motivation. Okay, if someone has a lack of motivation, that means they know how to do it, but they're not doing it. They're just not driven to do it. You want to find out, is there a reason why there's a lack of motivation? Sometimes it's not work related. It could be he's having problems or she's having problems at home, or they're having a problem with their teenage kid or something. Lack of both. Then how would you deal with that stuff? Lack of neither. Then it's something else. Okay, well, it's something else. What's going on here? You may find out that this person is working, like in my case, I was a single lady. So you may find out that this person is doing really bad because she's not getting along with her manager. And he's causing problems for her. And it's not really her, but it's coming out, it's showing up in her performance. So you have to address these different things, and everybody's going to be different. You have to address them all accordingly. Employees with high ability and high motivation are generally solid performers. Always the case. So diagnose and remedies to performance problems. So inputs, does employee know what he or she is supposed to do? Are procedures clear and logical? Do employees have adequate resources? Do other work demands conflict with performance? So what are the inputs? You start asking questions. It's almost like you're a police officer or you're an investigator. You got to understand, before you can implement a corrective action, you got to understand the nature and scope of the problem. Feedback, does employee get frequent performance feedback? Is feedback timely, accurate, and understandable? And this is something right here that I can tell you is highly important. And I'll give you an example. Feedback sometimes is what we refer to as on-the-spot correction. And that means, I see you doing something this morning that's wrong, or you did something this morning that's wrong. I don't wait till next week to talk to you about it. I actually talk to you about it right now. So you have that right there, but depending upon the nature and scope, you're always going to have that, and sometimes it's an on-the-spot type thing. Goals and objectives. Are the goals specified? Does employee know the goals? Does employee believe the goals are achievable and fair? You got to find out about this. And here again, this is like an investigator. You're asking questions. You're investigating the nature and scope. What's going on here? Like I said earlier, you can have somebody who's asking, well, what are you doing? Well, this is what I'm doing. Why are you doing it? And she can't tell you. She don't know. She don't know why she's doing it. She don't know the purpose of it. She doesn't know the goals. So there's a high probability she may not be doing a good job. Reviews and consequences. Rewards and consequences. Are the rewards for superior performance? There should be. You should always want to reward people for superior performance. Not only is it something to recognize them, but it's to show others what they could achieve and what they would get if they could step their game up. Are the rewards value? You find out, are you giving rewards that you think are valuable, that are valued, but none of the employees do? Are the rewards timely? If somebody's doing something and they worked on a project for 90 days, and at the end of that project, it was an outstanding and superior, then don't wait 6 months before you reward them. Legal requirements for performance management. Lawsuits often arise in two areas: discrimination and unjust dismissal. So when it comes down to performance management, and you have people who are underperforming, and there's some type of adverse reaction, whether somebody didn't get promoted and somebody got dismissed. I've always said to people, documentation is the one thing that saves you or sinks you. You've got documentation over the course of the last year to show that this person had problems, performance problems. So when you dismiss her, even if she sues, and here's something I tell managers. There are frivolous lawsuits out there, and there are people who will sue you even when they don't have just cause. But if you've got your documentation in place, it will protect you from discrimination and unjust dismissal. The Uniform Guidelines on Employee Selection Procedures also apply to performance measurement. Important to have legally defensible performance management system. So this means you have things that are standard in place based upon valid job analysis, evaluations based on behaviors rather than traits. Use multiple raters whose ratings can be appealed, and provide employees with feedback and coaching and training. And here's one of the things I can tell you is when you look at evaluations based on behaviors rather than traits. What did I see you do? Not who you are. That's when people get in trouble. When you're really rating him on who he is, not what he's doing. Electric monitoring employee privacy. Organizations often store records of employees' performance ratings, disciplinary actions, and work rule violations in electric database. So they have, if not, this right here, there's an old saying, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. This is why they're storing that. And particularly if it comes down to something adverse and potential litigation, you have to have these things, liability. You have to have this stuff because you won't have to go back to it and bring it up. Many companies use computers, sensors, and mobile devices to monitor productivity and other performance measures electronically. Can improve productivity, but raises privacy concerns. Electronic systems should be a substitute for careful management. So these things can work, but you also have to make sure that when it comes to the privacy concerns and stuff, everybody just doesn't have access. Meaning only the people who have access, only people who need access actually get it. That concludes this chapter.